Hello, this is MBA, and I'm going to introduce you to a discussion in Soren Kierkegaard. Um, uh, the discussion is on Kierkegaard's Abraham. First, before I continue, I'd like to introduce you to who Soren Kierkegaard is. Soren Kierkegaard is a Danish thinker who lived between 1813 and 1855. He is the most renowned of Scandinavian philosophers. Of course, you know what Scandinavia is. Scandinavia is a region that puts together Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, and Norway. So that's the Scandinavian region. So Søren Kierkegaard is the greatest of all Scandinavian philosophers, at least of his time. But his philosophical method, which is mostly the subjective, Kierkegaard mostly dealt with the subjective, in which he explored the existential living of a human being. So his philosophy is devoted into answering the question, what does it mean to live? And in doing so, he writes the book Fear and Trembling, and in the book he dedicates his philosophy into discussing Abraham. And first and foremost, Abraham is a renowned Christian, Judeo-Christian and Islamic figure. Muslims regard him as a patriarch and a prophet. Christians regard Abraham as a father and founder of the lineage that leads to Christ. And those in the Jews regard him as their father also. So Abraham has a special place in the history of the three religions. They're called the Abrahamic religions. So Abraham emerges from, in the Christian story, one of the most renowned stories in Christendom is the temptation or the test that God put Abraham through in the scriptures. So the question is, as Christians believe that Abraham is a father of faith, they believe that Abraham demonstrated faith in his encounter with God, when he was told to take his only son Isaac and go and offer him up as a sacrifice to God. So it's a major story in Christian faith because it demonstrated Abraham's faith in God. But the question that still rings about is, how does Abraham demonstrate his faith in God? So Abraham's faith is demonstrated when he believes that in offering up Isaac, he will be restored. Let me come again. So Abraham's faith in God, in the scenario where he is to offer up Isaac as a sacrifice to God, is seen when he is to believe that he will receive Isaac a second time. This is demonstrated in the way he behaves. And these are the things that Soren Kierkegaard captures in his Fear and Trembling. Soren Kierkegaard notes that in his journey to Mount Moriah, Abraham exuded the type of confidence which sort of eliminated his knowledge of a loss, that he was going to give his son as a sacrifice, and in the process he was going to lose his son. So Abraham's speech, Abraham's actions, Abraham's behavior, Abraham's silence speaks volumes. He doesn't tell his wife, and when his servants ask, not even asking, when he climbed up the mountain Moriah, he tells his servants that he will come again with his son. That in itself shows that he believed that he will get Isaac back, but again he is moving towards offering him as a sacrifice. So there's a contradiction in what Abraham does and what he's going to do. There seems to be a contradiction, and Kierkegaard addresses this contradiction by, first of all, he conceives several concepts that we're supposed to look at Abraham as. First of all, Soren Kierkegaard looks at Abraham's story vis-a-vis the story of Jephthah and vis-a-vis the story of Agamemnon in the Iliad. The Iliad is a book by Homer. It's a poetic book, and it talks about the Trojan War, the war between the Achaeans and the city of Troy. So the Achaeans and the Trojans had a war in which to win, the war between Troy and the Achaeans, which was Sparta, the rest of the Greeks, the Thessalonians and all those, the Greeks, they had the Ithaca, all those Greek Achaean territories. They marched together and to fight a war against Troy. The reason being that Agamemnon's brother Menelaus had a wife called Helen of Troy. So when Paris and his brother Hector went to see Menelaus, it said that Cupid shot arrows that connected Paris and Helen of Troy, such that Helen of Troy, the wife of Menelaus, fell in love with Paris, son of who? The Prince of Troy. He was a Prince of Troy. So, in so doing, there was a spat, there was a conflict between Sparta and Troy on that account. Agamemnon, the brother of Menelaus, was bloodthirsty, and he wanted to conquer the whole of Greece. And so what he did, he urged the territories that he had conquered, including Sparta, territory of his brother, and all the Greek territories, Ithaca, Thessalonica, all these Greek territories. He urged them into a war against Troy. Little do we know that this war was also a war of the gods, the Greek gods. And so to appease the gods on his side, Agamemnon took his daughter Iphigenia and burnt him up as a sacrifice. And so Kierkegaard looks at the story of Agamemnon and Iphigenia, and he says that the reason why, not the reason, but he looks at the situation, or whatever, he looks at the context in which Agamemnon offers up Iphigenia, and he says that by virtue of the ethical obligations of a man or a woman to society, the actions of Agamemnon are justified. So he fulfills the ethical in so doing. But Abraham is another story. These are two men who are offering up their daughters, not their daughters, their children, as a sacrifice. But one of them is regarded as a man of faith, the other one is not. The other one is Jephthah. Jephthah, in the book of Judges, had a daughter, and when Israel was going to war against was going to war in the book of Judges, Jephthah vowed that whatever comes through the door will be offered as a sacrifice to God. So whatever came was his daughter. So he took his daughter and offered his daughter as a sacrifice. And in that sense, though he did not offer as a burnt offering or that sort, like Agamemnon did, it is construed that he offered a sacrifice. So these are the three men involved in a sacrificial exercise to their gods. Abraham to the God of his forefathers, the God, the I am of Genesis. In Jephthah, it is all the same God, the God of Abraham. But Jephthah, it is the Greek gods who are on the side of the Achaeans. So, in doing that, we construe Abraham's move as a move of faith. But the moves of Jephthah and the moves of Agamemnon are construed as the moves of tragic heroes. Why would we say that Abraham was a man of faith? We say Abraham is a man of faith because he believed, by virtue of the absurd, that he will get his son a second time. He believed that the God who required Isaac of him would give him Isaac a second time. His faith was not just in obedience, but rather in believing in the promises of God. Despite obeying the command or the test, resigning to the test of God, he believed in God's promise that he would be a father of nations, that out of him would come generations. So he believes that he will get Isaac a second time. So that's his faith. This is demonstrated in the way he behaves. He doesn't tell anybody apart from himself. Not even, only he knows what would be with Isaac. He doesn't tell anyone. And even when Isaac is being bound and asks, "Where is the sacrifice?" Abraham says, "Jehovah Jireh, God will provide." He doesn't tell him that you are the sacrifice. No, he says God will provide. All these are a demonstration that Abraham believes by virtue of the absurd. But what is the absurd in Kierkegaard? The absurd is a movement in which the night, he calls when you move, when you are in the motions of obedience to God, you are resigned to the instructions, you are resigned to the outcome, and you reconcile yourself with the outcome, the pain of loss. So Abraham was reconciled with the pain of losing Isaac. He was reconciled with it, and he was in the process of offering up Isaac. So in that way he becomes a knight of infinite resignation. He is resigned to his pain, he is resigned to the instruction, and he is resigned to the fact that he will not receive Isaac the way he was, in the way he is offering him up. But unlike Jephthah and Agamemnon, he believes that he will receive Isaac a second time. So in doing that, he makes the movement of infinite resignation first by being resigned to the pain and to the loss and to the instruction. But he makes another step. He believes he will get him back. He believes in the promise of God that he is a father of nations, that out of his womb, out of his body shall come nations. So he believes he will get him back. This is something that neither Jephthah nor Agamemnon have in them. So Jephthah and Agamemnon are knights of infinite resignation. They are resigned to their pain. They are resigned to what they would call their instructions, which are not actually, which would not say their instructions because it is out of their volition. They do it by virtue of the ethical. They do it for a cause. So they are tragic heroes in that sense, that they accept the tragedy for a cause. In Agamemnon's case, It is to save the Achaeans against the Trojans in a war which even involves the gods. In the case of Jephthah, it is to save Israel against its enemies. So in their movements, Agamemnon and Jephthah are tragic heroes, and they are infinitely resigned to their pain. They accept their pain. So they are knights of infinite resignation. But in the case of Abraham, he first becomes a knight of infinite resignation, in the sense that he goes through the motions. He accepts the pain of losing Isaac. He accepts the instruction, and he performs in accordance with the instructions. But again, he believes. He goes further and believes that he will receive Isaac a second time. So in that sense, he becomes a knight of faith. So Kierkegaard's argument is that for Abraham to become a knight of faith, he first must become a knight of infinite resignation. He first must be resigned to his loss and move in accordance with the instructions, so that he would have a stepping stone towards faith. So a person of faith is a person who heeds instruction, accepts the loss before he can go a step further and believe by virtue of the absurd, the unthinkable. That's why Abraham is called a knight of faith, or a patriarch of faith in the Christendom. He's a patriarch of faith because he believes that he will receive Isaac a second time. It's not just about the instruction, because in the instruction is a resignation. It's a call to resign. It's a call to be resigned into the instruction and into the requirements of God, in that sense, which the instruction has been given. So in doing so, Abraham becomes a knight of infinite resignation. But he doesn't stop there. He goes further to believe that even in the instruction, there is a promise. And the promise to Abraham is that he becomes a father of nations. So Kierkegaard discusses further, and he says that does it mean that the ethics is suspended in Abraham's case? Because what are ethics? Ethics is a system of organization that guides. The ethics are moral. It's a morality system, a moral system that guides the actions and activities of a people. So in the days of Abraham, Jephthah, and Agamemnon, there were systems of ethics. So in these systems of ethics, a father is supposed to love his son or children in general. And in doing so, the father is not supposed to act in the way that Abraham did. So before the ethical, Jephthah is justified. Jephthah and Agamemnon are justified. The question is why? Yet they are going against the interests of their children. The reason why they are justified is because they sacrifice on behalf of society. That the greater society, their sacrifice is in the best interest of society. Jephthah sacrifices on behalf of Israel, Agamemnon on behalf of the Achaeans against the Trojans. But Abraham is sacrificing on his own case. Abraham's sacrifice benefits no one. It's in nobody's interest apart from himself. So, in doing what he did, the ethical for Abraham is violated. But why do we call him a knight of faith and not a murderer? That's it for today. We shall discuss that further in our next release. Thank you.